I'm back, and this time I'm here to talk about Brian Albert. And the difference between him and his brothers is like, for them, I had to go back a ways and say, oh, well, then when he was 26, he did this. When he was 30, he did this. Brian Albert has done enough shitty things between January 28th, 2022 and today that I have 6 pages of notes. We're going to get into it. I'm going to start with a list of 16 things that I think are highly suspicious about this dude. So 1, we all know he didn't go out on the lawn. He's a first responder, but didn't render aid when it was necessary. 2, the police never searched his home. 3, the police never secured the crime scene. 4, he didn't speak to anybody except for Officer Lenk. Even though there were other police officers, including Good and others that he could have given a statement to, he waited until Lenk could come into his home because we know Lenk is considered a friendly. He was present for everybody else's interview. And by the time that Proctor and Buchanan hit the scene, again, Brian was present for everybody's interviews, and they all took place at the McCabe's home to keep Proctor out of his. Number 7, he rehomed Chloe the dog 4 months after the death of John O'Keefe. Number 8, the floor in their basement was refinished. They said there was a leaky toilet, whatever. 9, they sold the home at 34 Fairview, a home that the Alberts had built in the 70s. They built it themselves. It had been in the family for 50 years. His parents gave it to them when they died, so he lived there for free. So other than the market was hot and Chris just sold his house, I can't think of any other reason why you would get rid of your family home of 50 years where you lived for free. 10, there's a lot of butt dials we got to talk about. 11, he already had legal counsel that was trying to block subpoenas on his phone. 12, he disposed of his phone 1 day before a protective order came through that he should preserve all the phone and all of the data associated with the phone. 13, Brian Albert's information, phone, address, it's either incorrect or edited on multiple police reports, almost as if people are trying to pretend this didn't happen at Brian Albert's house or they keep him out of the story altogether. 14, there is some conflicting information about when Brian Albert and Brian Higgins arrived at the waterfall that night. I don't think it has anything to do with anything, but for some reason it's in the testimony and I'm just going to mention it here. Okay, and 15, there's conflicting information regarding when Caitlin really left the home that night. And then finally, 16, I'm going to discuss the fact that both Brian and Nicole Albert report that when Jen McCabe came into their room that morning, she was hysterical. And we've got plenty of reason to believe she wasn't. So let's break down a couple of the quick hit items first. One of the things was the arrival at the Waterfall bar that night between Brian Albert and Brian Higgins. I don't know that this matters, and I don't know anyone would lie about this, but remember Brian Albert, Brian Higgins, Kevin Albert, and Eddie Hernandez, I think is his name, all came back from a funeral in New York. Apparently, Higgins and Albert went to have dinner together. And then, according to everybody at the Waterfall, they showed up at the Waterfall together. But if you ask Brian Albert and you ask Nicole Albert, they both testified that they came separate, that Brian Albert showed up at the Waterfall about 30 minutes before Brian Higgins. Now, I don't know why that matters, and I don't know why you would lie about it. The only thing I can think of is the Alberts are trying to separate themselves from the police. Like, oh, we're not really that close. We don't really know him. Oh, no. So I think maybe at some point was Brian Albert and Brian Higgins trying to pretend that they weren't that good of friends. And so maybe, yeah, that we went to the funeral together and we had dinner together, but we absolutely went out drinking separately and just happened to end up at the same place. I don't know why you lie about that. I don't know why it's a big deal. Now, I'm going to talk about the time Caitlin left the house. Now, I think uniformly to a man, everybody kind of agrees with the following. That Brian Higgins left the house at 1:30 in the morning. He's the first one to leave. Between 1:45 and 1:50, the McCabes leave and they take the 2 other gals with them. And then Caitlin leaves at 2 a.m. So that's kind of what we've been told all along. It turns out in their very first reports made to the police, both Brian Albert and Nicole Albert are very clear when they say to Lenk, our daughter Caitlin left at 12:15. Now, I think the reason they mentioned her leaving at 12:15 is the same reason that they never mentioned Colin. I think they're deliberately trying to get their kids out of the picture so the kids aren't witnesses or whatever. So I think they're kind of just trying to protect their kids. And they could probably be forgiven for kind of lying about that. But in Lenk's report, he had everything else right. He said, oh, they informed me their daughter left at 12:15. Her boyfriend Tristan came and picked her up. So he had everything correct except the time, because by the time they got to the grand jury, the story was Caitlin was the last to leave and Caitlin was there at 2. And they both swear up and down that Lank must have gotten it wrong, because they never, ever, ever said that she left at 12:15. Now, I think the reason for the change of story is because now the feds are starting to snoop around. There are phone records. They're probably able to do the GPS, cell phone tower voodoo magic with Tristan's information and figure Tristan wasn't at that house at 12:15. And so neither of them want to get up on the stand and hold with that lie. So they say, oh, well, Lank must have written it wrong in the report because she didn't leave until 2. Now that opens them up for another interesting set of what I think are lies, is that Nicole claims that once Caitlin left, just right around 2, a little bit after, Nicole stayed downstairs for a few minutes, cleaned her kitchen, because, you don't want to wake up to a mess the day after a party. Girl, totally hear ya. I get it. So let's just say she's down cleaning up the kitchen, taking out the garbage, doing that kind of stuff. It's 2:10, 2:15 before she goes upstairs. She says she went upstairs. Of course, Brian was already up there. He'd been in bed long before her. She goes up there, she gets ready for bed, gets in bed, and she says she's asleep by 2:30. Now, there's a couple of those butt dials that happen here in the middle of the morning. Nicole claims that she went to bed, that there were no phone calls, no texting, no nothing, everything dead silent, and she fell asleep at 2:30. But the federal investigation uncovered that Brian Albert and Brian Higgins had exchanged calls that evening. At 2:22 a.m., Brian Albert's phone called Brian Higgins's phone, and the call only lasts like a second. So that's probably enough for Higgins to pick up and go, dude, call you right back, because he's probably someplace where he can't talk. Then Higgins calls him back at 2:23. The call is answered, and they talk for 22 seconds. Now, both of them claim it's a butt dial. And Jackson went hard at Albert about this on the stand, because Albert claims, well, I brought my phone to bed with me that night, and I don't know how it butt dialed. Now, keep in mind, they have to have an excuse for the phone that's in the bed with him to be butt dialing without him opening it up, putting in a key thing, doing a facial recognition, whatever. So then comes the story where he and Nicole are having sex, and the phone is in the bed with them. So we're supposed to believe that Nicole gets upstairs, gets ready for bed, I'm assuming changes into some sort of pajamas or whatever, washes her face, gets into bed. There's about a 7-minute window where apparently their sex is so rowdy that his phone dials itself. Well, it unlocks itself. It dials Higgins's number. Higgins picks up, but then both phones hang up on each other. Then Higgins' phone calls back. And again, the sex is just so fucking rowdy that phone answers itself. Yet Higgins doesn't claim he ever made the call. There's no voicemail. So apparently there was just a 22-second sound of Mr. and Mrs. Albert humping and pumping. That's delightful. But then Nicole says she was asleep by 12:30. So yeah, not a lot of time for the sexual activity they're trying to pretend that they had. And of course, this story changed from the beginning. The story changed the first time around to say, I'm not really sure how that call took place. And then when they testified, it became, oh, it must have been during our intimate exchange when all those butt dials happened. I'm running out of time. I'm going to have to make a part 2. Come right back.